Before we get started today, I just wanted to double check that you've listened to the last episode, episode 24. It's the live podcast episode. And there's some really important information there. Mostly, I want you to be able to take advantage of the coupon code from Karama. If you go to karamacollection.com and you do your shopping and you use coupon code McCoy16SS, you'll get 15% off your order. If you want to be able to click a link and do that easily, check out beckylmccoy.com/24. I'm Becky L. McCoy, and you're listening to Stories of Unfolding Grace, the podcast about grace during unexpected times. You'll hear from real people dealing with hard stuff, and I hope you'll feel encouraged that you can bravely live through hard stuff too. Today I'm talking with my friend Debbie Wilkins Baisden about the sudden and tragic loss of her first husband. It's a really long episode, but I promise you're not going to want to miss a minute of it. I'm here today with Debbie Wilkins Baisden, and Debbie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you. So why don't you share with us a little bit about the story that you shared with me?
Okay, so I am a crazy mother of 4 little boys, and I've just passed the 4-year mark of losing my husband, Mr. Right, the father of my children, and this was all a very unexpected situation that we were thrust into, and obviously goes without saying, very painful. But it's been a really a good opportunity for me to put my money where my mouth is as far as my relationship with the Lord. I feel like this was my chance to say, am I really just a good little Christian girl who goes to Bible study, or do I really have this concrete relationship with my Maker? So my goal through all of this pain and loss and grief is to make lemonade from these lemons as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit more about the circumstances of your late husband's passing.
Okay, so we have 4 children, 4 little boys that we had in 4 years, and it was the summer of 2012, and the boys and I actually went to my husband Aaron's parents' house. They live near the coast of North Carolina, and so we were vacationing there, and my husband Aaron was going to come down and meet us in a few days. So he was getting to pretend to be a bachelor for a few days, and guys' beach trip, and it was going to be fabulous, and I was so happy for him. But unfortunately, as we were down at the beach, he and I had been texting some, and I was really mindful to not play the role of nagging wife that is always pestering. What are you doing? What are you up to? I miss you. All of that stuff I really tried to limit. But one day I had not heard from him, and I kept texting him, and I tried to space it out again to not be a frustration. And I just wasn't getting any responses from phone calls or texts. And I let it go throughout the day, trying to be calm and chill.
Yeah,
and
not jumping to any conclusions.
Yeah, like just it's okay. He's busy. He's on the go. He was probably playing racquetball and getting ready for his guys' beach weekend. And I finally told his father, I said, I have not heard from your son all day long. I'm going to officially get worried by 10 p.m. Mm-hmm. And he said, are you really worried? Is this really real? And I said, I'm not worried yet. Right now, I'm just concerned. And then as soon as it was 10:01, I said, now I'm officially worried.
Yeah.
Something has to be wrong. I have not spoken to Aaron since yesterday. And I think that's when it clicked for my in-laws that, whoa, she's being serious. She's not joking. And that's when I had to begin making phone calls home because I'm 4 hours away from home.
Right.
And I'm calling neighbors because we're all good friends and saying, I need you to look for Aaron. Have you seen him? I'm kind of, again, calm.
Yeah.
And a very long and dragged out story. A neighbor went and was able to locate Aaron's Jeep behind the school where he worked as a PE teacher and athletic director. But it was so late at night by the time all of this is happening that unfortunately the darkness was not cooperative.
Yeah.
And it transpired so quickly that my neighbor was able to reach out to other friends, other neighbors, and a few local family members who then met him at the Jeep saying, how do we find Aaron? Where exactly could he be? He's not answering calls. He's not responding to texts. And a massive group searched for my husband as I sat 4 hours away at his parents' house, losing my ever-loving mind.
Yeah.
And there was just no finding him. There were search dogs that did not find him. There were police involved. And finally, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I said, well, this is not good. So I'm leaving right now. I'm getting in the car. I've got a 4-hour drive back home to join this search.
With the boys, or did you leave them?
No, I said, I'm going to be right back. I'm going to come right back. So it's not a big deal.
Yep.
And Aaron's mom said, I'm going with you. So within 5 minutes, we were in the car and made a very long drive back to our hometown with people keeping me updated by phone saying there's still no news. It's dark with no chance of, where would he be, Debbie? And knowing that he loved nature, I knew he had the potential to be looking and working on his deer stand to get everything ready for hunting season that fall. And I said, I don't know where his deer stand is because I was always at home with the boys. So
right.
I did not go with him because I'm playing mommy.
Yeah.
And we finally got there about 5 o'clock in the morning. And so thankfully there was some light starting to aid the search. They were planning to call in search helicopters with thermal imaging and have more police show up to scan the area behind the school, which covers about 100 acres.
Oh my word.
So it was a very massive area that the police had already pulled friends out of, saying you're not going to find him. And even if you do at this point, it's not going to be a good situation.
Yeah.
And about 7 o'clock in the morning, Aaron's sister went against the police's suggestions and went back into the woods and said, I don't care. You're not going to stop me. I am going to find my brother. And it was probably within about 10 minutes that we heard her scream. And that was kind of the tipping point that changed my destiny. And you knew something was very, very wrong. And so within a few minutes, people running in and out of the woods, and I'm basically frozen like a statue. Within a few minutes, this when an officer came to me and informed me, Mrs. Wilkins, I'm sorry to tell you that your husband is deceased. So he had fallen from the tree where his deer stand was, several dozen feet up in the tree. He was not harnessed in because he was invincible, of course. He had fallen and severe trauma, obviously. And so he did not die on impact, which is a little bit surreal to think about. He had actually tried to crawl back down the trail that he had created, which I assume to get back into his Jeep, of course, and probably drive himself to the hospital because he knew he was severely hurt. So it just kind of demonstrates to me the tenacity he had, the kind of man he was to say, I am in a lot of pain. but I'll be okay because I'm invincible and I have a family and I'm very young. So it was.
How young was he?
He was 35.
Okay.
And you just don't see that kind of stuff coming because, I didn't have time to prepare for it. Not that I would ever wish a sickness on anybody in my family or not in my family, but there was no leading up to it. There was no, falling away kind of situation in that sense. So extremely shocking. I think I'm still in shock.
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't even, and people say this about my story often too, but it doesn't seem real. Like, that only happens in fiction. Like, that kind of thing doesn't really happen in real life. And then you hear it happening or experience it, and you just can't even put reality together almost.
Yeah, it was kind of like living in that moment. It was like being on set of a horrible Lifetime or Hallmark movie. I was like looking around like, are there cameras here? Am I getting punked? Like, this cannot be in the here and now fact. It's actually impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. Surreal doesn't even begin to to cover that feeling. Yes. So how did you react emotionally?
I looked over at my mother-in-law when she heard the news, knowing that she was having to call her husband, Aaron's dad, who was home with my four children.
With your 4 boys.
And so he had to pack up our children without telling them. He wanted me to have that blessing to be able to tell the boys. And so he had to pack up the kids, who were very confused, and had to drive them 4 hours without crying and without giving them this information. And so I think at first I probably shed about 2 tears, not because I wasn't sad, but because I was so stunned. It was like this, like a dream, like a really weird dream that you're just paralyzed because you can't take in the information, which I think is God's way of kind of insulating us to not be able to fully absorb the depth of reality.
Yeah.
And it was a very long morning of probably at least 4 hours of a lot of police and a lot of wilderness authority and crime scene investigators. And it was so overwhelming. I just was very quiet. I deal with pain very privately and quietly. I don't cause a scene and sob all over the place. I didn't need to be medicated. I was just very pensive in that moment, trying to repeatedly teach myself, my husband is dead. Aaron is in the woods. I haven't even seen him. Is this real? Just this cycle of thoughts that were playing over and over in my mind as I could barely pray in those moments because I just couldn't process thoughts. And so a lot of the time was just sitting, but I'm a pretty stubborn, independent person. So there were some friends by my side who were sweet and trying to offer me food and water and rubbing my back. And they were very mindful to stay quiet, which I appreciated.
Yeah.
And filling the silence. But I wasn't allowed to go in the woods for a while. And I did tell the investigator, I said, I want to see him come out of the woods. I need to know this is real. I don't believe any of this, so I need evidence. And so I finally was able to see them once they had done everything they needed to do. Because there were no witnesses, it was considered a crime scene, so they had to make sure that my husband wasn't killed. I was able to see under a blanket, he was covered, but I was able to see a body come out of the woods, which it just turned everything upside down.
Oh, my word. And
to stand next to this body and be baffled with emotion and sorrow beyond anything I could really describe. And I did lay my head on his chest because I had to know for myself. I had to confirm that there was no rise and fall of a chest, that everything was cold and without a heartbeat. And it was just, it's just, even now reliving it, it's just not real.
Yeah.
Not sure when that happens, but it has not happened, and I'm 4 years in.
Right. Yeah. Maybe when you get to heaven, you'll be like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. I'm ready for that day. I long for that day.
Yeah. Just bizarre. So bizarre. And it's interesting that you talked about how, like, that whole morning was just, like, talking with the police and talking with the CSI people. And that's what I always tell people, and people don't understand. Like, in that moment when you just need everything to be quiet, to be able to figure out what is happening, is when you have mountains of paperwork to do and, like, all this administrative thing. And, like, you don't get this, like, quiet moment to process life. And
Right.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's, like, the reality of your spouse dies, and you have to deal with all this stuff that is not emotional.
Right. That's so
at the
true.
beginning.
Yeah, and I think that's when really the body of Christ can really step in those moments, because they can't necessarily help with that paperwork mountain, but just to be prayerful, because sometimes I felt like I was not capable of praying, and I didn't feel guilty about that.
No.
But
Yeah.
knowing that people were praying for me, it really helped reveal that prayer is real, prayer is powerful, prayer is effective, because sometimes maybe it's just me. I feel like I'm just talking to thin air and not actually the King of Kings. And to know when people would say, I'm praying for you, I think that's kind of what propels you forward as you're doing the work of the funeral planning and writing an obituary, these crazy experiences that you don't think you'll do until you're 90.
Right. Yeah, it's so true. It, like, I always explain it to people. So in the Bible, in the Old Testament, when if you study the life of Moses, there's this one point where there's a battle going on, and God says, Moses, as long as your arms are up, Israel will win the battle. And he, of course, got tired. Like, who wants to stand there for hours holding your arms up? But and so his brother and one of his friends just stand there, and they physically hold his arms up for him, and they win the battle. And that was exactly what life felt like for me. Like, I had to keep my arms up. I had to keep living. I had to keep, filling out paperwork and, like, making decisions and doing all these things. But I couldn't do it by myself. Like, that's too much. So, like you said, like, knowing that people are there and praying, it was like you can see that helps. Mm-hmm. In those situations.
I love that example from the Bible, and I have never related it to that before. I love how you put that together. That's absolutely it. That's perfect.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like, people say, well, can I really relate to the Bible? Yes. Yeah, you can. Like,
exactly.
Trust me, you can. Okay, so what did you struggle with most in those days, months, weeks, after Aaron passed away?
I think my biggest focus, it was right before school started, which is very bittersweet. August is really hard for me emotionally. Just our last conversation was when I was buying school supplies in Walmart. And so every year as the school season renews, it's just that little twinge reminder that life does go forward. And Aaron, you're missing out on these really amazing milestones. And I think I wanted to teach the boys the reality of the Bible, that it is the living word and not just a book. And I wanted them to learn that their father was very much alive, and that there very much is a very real reunion coming. If you truly believe in Christ, not in this fairy tale made up coping mechanism, but in a very real yet invisible way. And so I just kept saying, this sucks. This is so freaking hard. And I'm just so, I can't even put into words really just how sad I am at the surprise loss. And yet I always wanted to add that, and yet God is so real. God is so good. He is so faithful because he is the perfect father. So though you are fatherless, which the Bible speaks directly about, that you have the perfect father and that there is this reunion coming. And let's study about heaven. Let's learn where your dad now lives. And what do you think he's doing right now? Is he talking about you to Noah?
Right.
Does King David know about the Wilkins boys? This is very much real. And so I think I always wanted to be authentic with my pain and not gloss it over with them, to be able to spontaneously crumble and fall apart in front of them and weep, and still through tears to say, God is good. Do not turn away from him, because he is the anchor. He is the forever.
Right.
He allowed this and will comfort you and meet you where you are to make you who he needs you to be. So it was really hard to adjust to the single mom mentality of that life I was, quote unquote, never going to live. I was never going to be a single mom. No way. That's for other people.
Right.
And God was like, girl, you are so dumb. I know that's what he was thinking. And to just do the drudgery of parenthood. And I would tell the boys, I cannot be two people. I can't be both parents. I can almost be one and a half. I cannot be two.
Yeah.
I can't be a man. I can't be that fun, spontaneous, nature-loving dad that you need. But I will do the very best that I can. And I'm begging at the feet of Jesus for him to fill me and fuel me so that I can do baths and homework and driving and household chores and do all the stuff without imploding.
Yeah.
And that was really hard.
I want to go on a tangent for just a second.
I love it.
Talk a little bit about, this is going to be like the longest podcast episode ever, but it's okay. I'm fine with it. So talk about that season, because you're remarried now. And so talk about that season of single parenthood and how there's this sense of like you don't fit in anywhere.
Yeah, it was really surreal at the beginning because there was a Halloween party that some friends were hosting, and I kind of welcomed some distraction and off to, I love Halloween parties. I love dressing up. And so I said, how can I help you guys? You're my friends. And as I started putting together this guest list, I thought, oh, wow, everybody's a couple except for me.
Yeah.
Oh, does this change all of my friendships? Does this make it weird for other people saying, well, we can't just invite Debbie to dinner or Debbie and the boys over, because no one really invites you over when you have 4 kids. I mean, come on. And so now to add 4 kids and there's no spouse, that's kind of weird. So it was very sad to me. I don't mind being alone. I am very, again, independent, and I like quiet alone time. But when it's on repeat, when it's a constant, late at night, I'm like, oh, what's my new normal? How do I do post bedtime stuff? Do I watch TV by myself? Is that weird? Do I just go to bed early? Do I read books? It's like everything had to be overhauled and refigured out.
Yep.
And my friends were amazing at not making me feel weird or excluded. They were very loving, and lots of girls rallying around, and maybe a little less of the couple stuff. I will say that God's timing is so mysterious. He will never be pinpointed in my mind as far as how he works, and his ways are not our ways. I do think so many people were praying in those early days about, Lord, help Debbie find another man. She's got all these kids, and bring a good Christian role model and all these things that thankfully they did not voice out loud to my face, because I would have punched him in the throat.
Freaked out, yeah.
But I do think God answered that prayer And it was kind of like ready or not. It was the same with Aaron's death. Ready or not, it's done. This divine appointment has taken place. And I think it was the same when Jason and I started dating. It was like, ready or not, I am putting this man in your life, deal with it. And he's wonderful. And it's very hard to have this ridiculous amount of emotion and pain and adjustment, and then to be like, hey, do you want to start dating? You know, it's just too much. It really doesn't make sense.
Bizarre.
Yeah, it really is. And that just stirred up a whole nother complicated pot of emotions that came with it. So I will say I was not single for very long. And I did envision being single forever. That was my accepted lot in life of, well, God, thank you for the 11 years of marriage I did have. Thank you for the children that are my souvenirs in that relationship. And I'm going to live out the rest of my days alone. And I have to be okay with that. I have to get my identity and my significance from him instead of other guys. And I had to be very mindful of that and accept it, whether I liked it or not. And it turned out that wasn't God's plan for my particular situation, which is kind of weird. It was creepy. I mean, the whole thing sounds creepy.
Yeah, I can identify with so much of what you're saying. And it's just so strange to be in that place where even if you have friends, like it sounded like you did, and I definitely do, that your relationship doesn't change with them if they're friends who really care about you, and they're not all of a sudden like, oh, well, we can't be friends with you anymore because you're not part of a couple. But you don't really fit in with them, even though you have kids. But then you have single friends who you don't really fit in with them either because you have kids. And like, it's just like this like strange, I just don't even know how to explain it to people.
It is hard to explain that you're kind of your own category, and being a young widow is not a common thing. It's more common to maybe have divorced friends, which there are similarities to.
Right.
But it's like, well, I can relate to most grandmothers. Well, that's great. That's really helpful.
Right. Yeah. It's like, who are my people in this season? Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I get so excited to see people choosing to live bravely and authentically. Each week on Tuesdays and Fridays, I host a Facebook Live event to share more stories of people living bravely, and I want to hear your story too. Join us at facebook.com/Becky L. McCoy. I can only share so much with you here on the podcast, but you can read my story and learn more about living bravely and authentically at my blog, BeckyLMcCoy.com. Stop by and sign up to receive my monthly newsletter. It includes book recommendations and blog posts and podcast episodes you may have missed. Check the show notes for details. So, how did you handle Aaron's loss? How did you handle it? And do you feel like you handled it well, or would you have done it differently?
That's a great question. I did start grief counseling about 6 weeks after Aaron passed away. I think I needed time for that mountain of paperwork to subside a little bit before I get my head back on straight. And I wanted the boys, I put them first, making sure there was some counseling getting started with them. And my grief counselor was someone that Aaron and I had seen for marriage counseling over the years. And so we had this backstory. He knew us and he knew Aaron. He was at Aaron's funeral. And I said, well, he's the go-to. He's amazing. He's a man of God. And I went to grief counseling for It was several months. And there was a point when his name is Alan, and he said, Debbie, you're done. Like you're graduated. I don't want you to keep coming anymore. And I said, Alan, no, I am going to keep coming. I need help. I don't have a grip on life, and I am a hot mess. I can't do this alone. Like, you have to be my sounding board and help me to know I'm not screwing up my kids and screwing up myself. Like, where's the widow handbook?
Yeah.
How do I know what the heck I'm doing? And he was like, nope, you're good. I've heard you enough that your perspective and outlook is healthy enough where I feel confident that you're going to be okay. So I fought it, but he said, in the end, you've got enough to do. Let's clear up your calendar. You're not coming to see me anymore unless, you really have some kind of breakdown.
Yeah.
So I think instead of reading a bunch of books on death and grieving and widowhood, which I don't knock at all, I said, I really need to just turn to the source. And I just really tried to dive into the Bible because I was like, this is the truth. He is the one who has all the answers. I don't really need man's opinion. I need God's authority on how to live my life. And the biggest struggle I had, because I feel like I know we're all going to die. I know that Aaron is in heaven. I know that I am going to heaven. So a lot of those boxes had already been checked off for me mentally. Uh-huh. My deal was, how do I live in the here and now? What is my biggest struggle? And yes, part of it was just the grieving part of like, I miss my best friend. I miss the guy that I cuddled on the couch with and who I prayed with before falling off to sleep at night. Mm-hmm. Was how do I feel important? Because I had been Aaron's wife. Well, now I'm just Debbie. And what does that mean? And so the only other book that I did read was The Search for Significance, which is finding our worth in God's eyes. I really struggled with that, about how to feel important and feel loved and feel special. And I had been looking to Aaron for 11 years to make that happen. You make me feel special. You fill all the voids in my life and be my source of contentment and make me feel pretty. Well, now you're not there. And to then say, nope, truly, in the day-to-day, it has to be God alone to say, no, you fill me.
Yeah.
I am the daughter of a king. I am worth dying for on a cross. How can I serve you? How can it be less about me and more about God? I think that was the hardest part for me, and really just having to live hour by hour in that pain. And then slowly it became living day by day, and then it became living week by week, if that makes sense.
Yep. So I'm using this definition of grace as when good things happen during hard times. And how did you see grace through all of this?
I love that. I love everything about the word grace, and I love that you focus on that. I feel like, I got so many little cards in the mail from strangers in those times, which was very weird because I would never write a card to a stranger. But I think because, he was a community person, he was a teacher. So there was that, it's in the news. So people are seeing this on the 6 o'clock news, or they're reading it online or in the paper. So people were so loving to just send these kind, encouraging words. They were sending gift cards so we could eat and not just starve because mom is too checked out to really think about making dinner on a regular basis. And for people who I would see people in the store that would come up to me and say, I'm sorry, are you that widow? Which is very, it kind of takes you like, what?
A little presumptuous, but okay.
Yeah, I don't know you. And for them to say, I don't know you, but I've prayed for you. Those prayers were such a gift of God being tangible in little pockets to say, Debbie, I'm with you. I am for you. I'm ahead of you. I'm beside you. I'm carrying you. I'm nudging you along as I walk behind you. I think really it was the Christ with skin on stuff that really showed up as grace, and having such close friends who love the Lord and could say, Debbie, you're doing okay. It's all going to work out. Your kids are going to be okay. I needed those reminders, and people were able to do just the little things that kept us afloat for months when it was just so unpredictable and so new. It's almost hard to count how many ways that God's grace showed up, but he just kept moving us forward as it's like, I try to compare it as to the grief is like being thrown into this plunging pool of ice cold water. But the way that God does it is he doesn't throw you in and have you drown.
Yeah.
And kind of put his foot on top of your head. Instead, it was like, for me, he inched me in, first putting in my big toe, and then my foot, and then my ankle. And he just gently lowered me into the freezing cold water so that the shock didn't undo me. And like you said earlier, all that paperwork was kind of a mixed blessing because it kept me distracted. Yeah. And being a mom kept me functional. So I couldn't rock myself to sleep in a corner clutching a whiskey bottle because I had to keep functioning.
Even though there were plenty of days where that's what you wanted to like.
Exactly.
That's the option you want sometimes. Yeah, I always, people always tell me I don't know how you get out of bed in the morning. Like, well, one, because I have to. Like, there are some days when I wish I could stay in bed all day. That would be wonderful. That sounds like a luxury. But, you know, that it just shows that we all have our different journeys in grief, and nothing is better or worse. It's just we're handling it how we're handling it. And
absolutely.
And that's okay.
Yes.
How do you feel like you've lived bravely and authentically as a result of losing Aaron?
I felt like very early, I kind of reached out on Facebook, knowing I had friends that knew what had happened, or maybe acquaintances who knew what had happened. And so I was like, I felt very under a magnifying glass. Like, people are curious by nature about others. That's why we all like to people watch. But saying, if people are going to watch me, then I surely have extra incentive to do this God's way. And so I would share lots of Bible verses instead of being kind of pouty and doing this online mourning that makes others feel awkward. I really try to say, death really sucks. Here's the spoiler alert, everybody. You might have a spouse that dies. We all have pretty good odds.
Yeah.
Dying and attending a funeral of the one we love most. So this is not an isolated incident. This is not the last death that you all may hear about. And how can we then do that death thing and still keep our eyes heavenward instead of looking around at like the earthly view of things? We all need more God. Let's all read the Bible. Here's what the Bible said. So I would share lots of verses, and I would also take that time to encourage other people to love their spouses well in the here and now, to stop griping. I didn't want to hear people griping about their husband going out of town.
Oh, my word.
Or how their husband sucks about not picking up laundry, or he never pitches in with doing dishes. I really didn't want to hear it. And I'm thinking, don't you know how good you have it? Like, let me encourage you through my loss to do better. I wish I had known to do better.
Right.
Now I know to do better. Let me help you. And so I've tried to be very authentic and transparent when I write my blogs, to be very raw with my emotion, to not say death is really hard and I am so sad, but to say, no, here's what it's like to touch a cold, dead body. Here's what it's like to see your husband with this bizarre orange makeup on as he lies in a casket. Here's what it's like to tell your kids that their dad is dead and they'll never see them again. I really try to be purposefully extreme
Uh-huh.
so that people can go with me to the depths of those emotions and then change their own destiny for the better, if possible. I hope. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you because, and I feel the same like weight of encouraging people to really prioritize their marriages. And I'm always telling my friends, like, leave your kids with me, go on a date, like, go, because I want to support your marriage and I want to see you guys love each other well. Just to remind them, like you said, like, this is not the last death. There will be more death. And so figure out how you want to handle it now. Like Keith and I, he was sick, so we had a little bit of time together, but he passed away 3 months after he was diagnosed. So we didn't really and we thought he had more time than that. So it was kind of a mix of that. You get to prepare ahead of time and it's a shock. But we took the time in the very beginning to have really hard conversations. So I encourage people now, like, yeah, maybe neither of you is sick, but you don't know what's going to happen. So get stuff figured out now while you have that time to do it. What would you say to someone who has recently lost their spouse or who is dealing with some kind of really shocking event? How would you encourage them?
You know, I hate when that does happen. I feel like every time I meet a new widow, I just sigh, this deep sigh of sadness. And I think at first, what's most important is to be encouraging them to feel the feelings that
Yes.
It's been crazy. People really impose their grief rules on other people. And I've talked to so many widows whose family or friends are saying, okay, enough is enough. Like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
It's time now. Yeah.
It's 6 weeks. You should be good.
Oh, my word.
Or people feeling that they need to comfort other family members and somehow displace their own very real pain. It's so unfortunate. So I think I try not to reach out to a lot of people in those first few weeks on purpose, because it's just such a flood of crazy that they really you can't really process well, and you kind of don't want to hear other
anything.
people's.
Yeah,
I didn't want to hear it. Maybe that's just me. I don't want to speak.
Oh no, we use the phrase "just sit down and shut up." Like, just be with me, but don't say anything. And if you're gonna say anything, let it be. Let me clean your toilet for you. Like, let it be meet a practical need.
Yeah.
Don't address the grief. Yeah.
Yes, I do tell people, as they're the helpers to those who've lost. Don't say, call me if you need anything.
Yeah.
Just step in and start doing the hard stuff.
I'm going to do this for you.
Right. So I think for those who've just had this like rug pulled out from under them, to just say, number one, this sucks so bad, to just acknowledge it and kind of let it sink in. I feel like the sinking in is such a slow process, and to grieve however you want to grieve and feel those emotions, to be mad and confused and numb and all of the different adjectives of however you're feeling is okay, and to deal with it however you need to deal with it. And then I think after a certain point of time, to say, it's okay to be mad at God and to question him. Just don't live there. Just don't stay in that place, because that anger he can handle, but it can so easily become rooted into bitterness. And then you turn from God instead of toward God. And that's a very scary place to be. So I feel like I say, yeah, God really can blow your mind, and you can tell him how bad this sucks, and you wish your loved one was still here and alive. Why would you do this to me? But instead of parking there, just camp and then try to relocate by pressing into God and his word. He's the only one who's really going to get you through this. Like, humans are going to try to say really sweet phrases, but they fall flat compared to this living, breathing word of God, and just asking him, like, reveal yourself to me, help me, comfort me, and help me, not to hate you, God, or whatever. So I think, I just try to give people the space to say, I'm 4 years out from it. I can assure you the pain won't always feel like it does right now. It's always going to hurt. We will have our last day on earth still aching for that person. That part doesn't change in the fact that it goes away, but it will always be there, but it won't always feel like it does today. And I feel like that gives some hope of, okay, maybe I'm going to get some traction in life at some point.
Yeah. And so you're remarried now, but that doesn't erase the grief. That doesn't like put a patch over the fact that your first husband passed away. The father of your boys passed away. It doesn't make it magically better.
Yeah, and I think that was assumed, rightfully so, because if I had known a young widow friend and all of a sudden she starts dating, now granted, I started dating Jason, who I had known for 12 years and was a close friend of Aaron's.
Okay.
He was one of the people in the woods for 7 hours.
Wow.
Looking for his friend Aaron, not knowing in the end he's going to marry Aaron's widow. That was obviously not the plan.
Not his motive. Yeah.
That's the crazy way that God, of course, has to work. But in those beginning days, I did have a close friend come over, and he said, I'm concerned about you and this Jason friend of ours. I think it's too fast. It's too much. And I said, yeah, no, I hear you, except there's this one catch. What if God's prayers work? Wouldn't that be crazy if all these people were praying for poor Debbie and all those kids? What if God answers prayers? Because I'm pretty sure people were saying, I hope she finds a new man. I said, but what happens is we tell people how we want them to do things, and we tell God, we humanize God and say, God, find her a man, but not yet.
Right.
God, find her a man, but only after it's been 5 years. God, find her a man, but he has to be a non-existing friend. And I said, what if you're the one that's making the mistake by telling God he has done something wrong? I said, I am still very much feeling my feelings. I am still very honest and upfront with Jason, telling him I'm in love with 2 men, and that's real. And for Jason to respond and say, there would be something wrong with you if you didn't feel that way.
Wow.
So Jason he's just, it's almost like he's not human. He's just, it blows my mind how good of a fit God gave me as a second husband. I never intended to marry twice.
Yeah.
And even if my wildest dreams included that, he probably, of course, would have been an idiot loser, but he's not. God has been so gracious. And so in those days when people were kind of like, she's already dating? Well, this is like a rebound and she's just lonely. But what if it's not? Give me some credit,
right,
to being a functional adult who can make sound decisions,
right,
and still be grieving. I'm always going to be grieving, and yet God has said, "This is my plan. I'm telling you, you're going to remarry very quickly," and it has been, yes, unusual, but just a huge gift to have someone that knows stories about Aaron that I don't know, that he can tell the boys. One time when I was camping with your dad, and so Aaron's memory is very much honored, and Jason often will ask me, how would Aaron have handled this situation? Because his goal is to try to raise the boys in a way that would have matched how Aaron would have done it, which is pretty crazy.
That's amazing. It really is amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know, like, everything that you said, I'm like, I'm so glad that people get to hear this, because I know that, it's not like everyone listening is a young widow or will be widowed at any point, but there are so many things that you've said that we've talked about that people can kind of pull out and apply to whatever they're grieving, whether it's the loss of a person or something totally different. So thank you very much.
I have loved it. This has been the biggest privilege, and everything that you're doing is, I just applaud you. I'm really proud of you. And so it's all you.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, before we go, I want to give people a chance to get to know you a little bit better. So I'm going to ask you some fun questions.
Oh, yeah.
So the first thing is, what are you loving right now?
Bojangles, which is kind of a Southern fried chicken thing. If you're listening and you don't know what that means, it means horrible fast food. And I love pizza, and I drink Smirnoff Ice on the weekends.
That's awesome. Well, so my second question was going to be, what's your favorite food? But you went there already, so that's all. I love it.
It's always. I love sugar.
Way to own it. Just own it, right, man. That's awesome. What are you doing to take care of yourself?
I do a lot to take care of myself. I do have 2 online businesses that actually, it sounds funny after my first answer, that focus on fitness and nutrition. So I work out 4 days a week for 20 minutes, so a total of 80 minutes a week. I lift heavy weights, and I also 90% of the time eat really healthy. So tonight I won't. Tonight is more of the pizza, sugar, Smirnoff Ice night. But
okay.
The other 6.5 days of the week, I try to take care of myself by eating the foods that God grows. So that's how I take care of myself. I don't sleep enough because I'm type A and
you have 4 boys. Like, let's be honest. Yeah.
They are rascals. But so that's, to me, food and fitness are great ways to take care of myself. And I do my best at least 5 days a week to start my day in doing my devotions. So I am really seeking God first. That, of course, is the number one of all things on my list.
I'll put Debbie's website in the show notes so that if you're curious to learn more about her businesses, you can find them there. The last question is, what are you doing to be brave?
You know, this is something that you and I can relate to from going to the She Speaks conference, which is under the Proverbs 31 Ministries with Lisa Turkhurst. I'm kind of shaking to even talk about it, but I'm really trying to ask God to shove me outside of my comfort zone and to do more writing, which maybe one day will be a book. I do have a first draft of a book talking about my loss, my journey from all the widowhood stuff, and to make it something applicable for all women. Like you mentioned a few minutes ago, maybe you're not a widow, but you have experienced pain, and pain is pain. It may have a different color to it, but pain is pain. And so by doing this writing, it really kind of puts your emotions on display, and it's hard not to say, please like me, please like the words that I write, and still be, encouraging me when really people may say, yeah, your words are horrible. It doesn't make sense. We can't relate to it. Please don't do any more writing. But for now, I am trying to be brave and obedient to say, God, I'll do whatever you tell me to do, because you've told me I am not the boss.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Since we've cleared that up.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Debbie. I look forward to sharing your story with everyone. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're there, please rate, review, and share Stories of Unfolding Grace. When you give it 5 stars, it goes a huge way in helping other people find the podcasts by increasing my ranking. If you're interested in sharing your own story of unfolding grace, head to my blog, beckylmccoy.com/submissions. I can't wait to hear from you. Next week on Stories of Unfolding Grace, I'm talking with Della Gallagher about living with chronic illness and also about the last couple years in her life when her health status changed and she went through divorce and just everything about life got turned upside down. Thanks again for joining me. I'm looking forward to next week.